and call the meeting to order. Today is Tuesday, December 13th, 2022. First item on the agenda is going to be the approval of the October 11th, 2022 minutes. If you have reviewed it, do we have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
I will second.
We have a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passed. Moving on to the council liaison report for December 5th.
The city council met on December 5th, as you said. Major things that we did was to set the budget for 2023 at $2.95 million. Actually, a slight reduction in from what the original estimate was. All in all, it's a pretty good budget. It's pretty much bare bones. It's just what we're going to be doing, and everything is really fully justified. Approved some minor changes to the short-term rental ordinance due to changes that happened at the county. The county will no longer issue short-term rental licenses to areas that have their own process. So we have our own process, so they won't issue. So we had to take that. Oh, you can hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So they will not be issuing short-term rental licenses for the city of Reason Point because we have our own ordinance. And then we also established a speed study policy that will outline how you would request a speed study if you wanted to have the speed adjusted on your street. So you have to get a percentage of the residents to approve and go along with you to do that. And it establishes the guidelines. We didn't have a policy before, so this actually establishes a formal policy for initiating a speed study. And then we also approved WSB for the Bushman Road project to do the engineering. That has already done that because we want them to get started the first thing in 2023, so we get all of the engineering done during 2023 to support construction in 2024. It was a fairly long meeting from the standpoint of the budget presentation. Took some time, and I will have to say it's one of the very good budget presentations. I would recommend everybody would review that on the video because it goes into a lot of detail as to what we're going to be spending money on and why we're going to be spending. So, any questions?
I couldn't make the meeting, but I did watch part of the video, and they did bring up the VRBO thing. So it seems like the county is just jumping around like...
Yeah, the county basically used to have it under their, essentially the health department, because it's dedicated short-term rentals and the septic systems. So that's how it got in there. And various communities had issues with them not consulting, and we did because, our existing ordinance limited it to certain areas, and that wasn't a company. And so if the city has their own ordinance, they will not be issuing licenses for those municipalities.
Does that mean they won't be collecting funds, or does that mean that once we issue one, they would have to get a county one?
No.
So no county at all?
No county involvement within the city of Breezy Point.
Oh, wow.
So it's going to need some procedure and process changes for us as far as tracking it. How do we track them? Because we were counting on using the short-term rental map that the county has issued. So that will no longer be correct.
So are they still capping it at that 60?
It will still be capped at 60, yes.
Still doing the $300 fee? With
$250.
the $250?
Hi there, Assistant City Administrator Daniel Ike, just so everybody knows for the record. Yeah, if I recall correctly, it's $300. I'll need to double check with Administrator Chansky if that still pertains. We're actually finalizing that process right now. We have the letter that's going out to residents drafted and the application form drafted and stuff like that. So we're still piecing together kind of the very final bits of it. But yeah, it should be $300. It'll still be capped at the 60 that was talked about before. As Councilman Lillehei said, they just kind of kept course on exactly what they already decided. It's just there was no need to include the county anymore because the county decided that they weren't going to go down that road after all. So that's kind of where we're at right now.
This was essentially an 11th hour decision by the county. They had some issues with it, and they backed out just like last month. Left us kind of hanging because one of the first predicates that we had in our ordinance was that they had to get a county license first. So that's essentially what the change was we just struck that out of there. So we're on our own now. So we can basically control it ourselves completely. Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you. We are going to proceed with opening a open forum. So if you would like to address, you are welcome to come up to the podium and state any items that are not currently on the agenda. If you are on the agenda, you'll have an opportunity, of course, to present. But if you are not on the agenda and would like to share something with us, feel free to approach the podium and identify yourself. All right, then we are gonna, I don't see anyone coming up, so we're gonna go ahead and close the open forum, and we're gonna move on to our public hearing. That's first on our list. And this is the public hearing for the interim use permit application I-22002 for Brad Thayer for home occupation, manufacturer medical supplies at 8442 Bushman Road, Breezy Point, Minnesota, east 663 feet of southeast a quarter parcel, 100-50509, zoned estate lots EL. So we are going to open the public hearing, and the first item here is the applicant presentation. So we're going to go ahead and invite the applicant to come to the podium, identify themselves and their address, and go ahead and proceed with any presentation.
Brad Thayer, 8442 Bushman Road. Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the Planning Commission. First, I would like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to apply for a home occupation. After several years of searching for buildings and/or properties in and around the Breezy Point area that may accommodate my needs to no avail, it brings me here tonight. At first glance, when you see manufacturer medical supplies, I get that there could be visions of a giant factory with smokestacks firing off, numerous employees, and constant deliveries coming in and shipments going out. This would not be the case. The home occupation that I am proposing would allow me to operate my current precision medical manufacturing shop on my property. In order to do so, I would need to construct a 40 by 92 climate-controlled building, add 3-phase power, and allowance for 1 outside employee. I would not be open to the public and there would be no retail. As I stated in my application, I will request the max limit of 2 outside employees with the complete understanding that if I were to need more than 2, I would no longer meet the criteria of home occupation. This is an example of the largest part that I manufacture. And this is an example of the raw material used to make those parts. Here's a current example of 5,000 parts that are going out this Friday. For outgoing shipments, I use an independent contractor who uses his personal vehicle, which is a sedan. Nothing against UPS or FedEx, but if a shipment were to be lost in that tiny box, I got about 2 to 3 weeks worth of work in there. and his trips average about 1 to 4 per month. For deliveries, as an example, I just ordered 92 of these boxes of raw material, and they arrived in 3 18-inch cubed boxes. In other words, our Amazon orders to our house and our shop-related items would be on the same truck or delivered in the same manner. These would average about 4 to 5 trips per month. In a typical day, there will be no changes in traffic. Instead of leaving my property to travel to my business, my one outside employee would drive to the property. All manufacturing processes would be completed within the facility to control and prevent concerns of noise, vibration, smoke, dust, and fumes as directed in the criteria for home occupation. There are no harsh chemicals involved, and the waste from the manufacturing is all recycled. With the end product being used in the medical industry, it is of utmost importance that it is a very clean and sterile environment to maintain very strict medical regulations. All noise from the machines and operations would be comparable in range from a household washing machine to just simply shuffling paper. I hope with all this said, and along with the information previously submitted with the application, provides a clear picture of my proposal. However, I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Questions?
So you say the sound is like a wash machine? Does it cut metal, or what does it do that it's so quiet?
Right, I have a wire EDM, which would use water for flushing and uses like 10,000 stick wire for the cutting. And then I have like a tumbler machine. You know, I guess, you know, without explaining what machines I have, you know, that's why I use the washing machine comparison.
Okay. But no smells?
What's that?
There's no odor from the cutting or anything?
No, the coolants I use would be all water soluble.
Okay.
What are the hours of your operation?
Usually 8 to 5:30.
And then you had mentioned you have one employee. Do they basically come and then leave? Is it like one trip a day that they typically, like one round trip, or do they leave for lunch or anything?
Some days we go for lunch, some days we don't.
Okay. And then outside of that, it sounds like, just kind of reading through, 1 to 4 per month for the shipments, and then Amazon, that might be 4 to 5 trips per month. So
Right.
it doesn't sound like there's really too much going on a daily basis other than the employee coming to
Right.
and from work.
Correct.
Okay. And it sounds like you don't need signage or anything like that.
No,
Okay.
I'd rather not.
On the building that you have, according to the diagram, it looks like it is not even probably seen at all from the road. It's,
It'd be pretty much right in the middle of my 20 acres, yeah.
okay.
And I'd still use the driveway, you know, there'd be no other roads that would have to be added. I'd just use my existing driveway.
Okay. Does anyone else have questions?
Yes, so with the water usage, is that, I'm assuming there's no city sewer down Bushman there?
There is not.
Okay. So then would you have to add on to your septic, or would it be the septic that you have?
I would have to get a well and probably a septic tank, yeah.
Just
I would just have one bathroom in the facility.
Okay. Okay. I just didn't know if all that water's going through your drain field, or will be, or,
It's more of a water drip, like a dehumidifier, you know,
Oh,
like a
okay.
constant drip from the, you know, so it's just like nothing major, it's
Okay.
just a small drip, yeah. And like when I use for the noise, you know, like the wash machine, if a wash machine was running right here and running in here right now, it would overwhelm the noise. But if we had it in the front office with the door shut,
right?
you know, what would you hear? So that's why I made that comparison. Everybody's got a wash machine.
Yep.
I got another question.
Yeah.
Why such a big building? You got these little pieces.
Yeah, I make my own tooling too, so I have 19 pieces of machinery.
So there might be more noise than what
Well, it'd be like a small lathe and a small mill.
metal lathe.
Yeah. I would say the loudest noise I would have would be my air compressor. And like right now I have that out in my shop and it's obnoxiously loud. But if, in this place, I'm gonna put a utility room and then have a housing for that air compressor, so I don't even hear it in the shop barely, you know. That would be my main concern for the noise, would be that air compressor. Otherwise, everything else is, once you go outside the building, you'd have to put your ear up against the building to hear it.
I don't have any real questions. Is this similar to like plastic injection molding? Or,
Kind, similar, the EDM machine would be in that range, yeah.
okay,
And like for the steel, the thickest is 5/1000 that I stamp out, so I mean, a jewelry blank was probably 100 times that thickness.
Any other questions at this time? If we do have more questions, we may invite you.
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, moving on to staff review. Jerry, if you can take it from here.
Again, this is interim use permit application 2022002. Applicant is Brad Thayer, address 8442 Bushman Road. Parcel number is 100500509, and the zoning of the property is estate lots. Mr. Thayer is making application for an interim use permit for a home occupation at 8442 Bushman Road. This is a property that he currently resides at. The definition of a home occupation is the use of a commercial nature conducted by an occupant of a dwelling entirely within the dwelling or the accessory buildings, which use is clearly incidental and secondary to the use of the dwelling for residential purposes. The interim use permit is the same criteria as a conditional use permit with a specific ending date or a specific sequence of events that take place. That is entirely word for word out of the zoning ordinance. Mr. Thayer currently resides at 8442 Bushman. The property is a 20-acre parcel. There's a survey included in your packet. The zoning of the property is estate lots. The property currently hosts a 2-story home and 3 outbuildings. The accessory structures, the cumulative total is 1836 square feet. And there's photos of the buildings that occupy that piece of property in your packet. Mr. Thayer currently operates a specialty medical manufacturing facility in a rented structure in Fairfield Township. Mr. Thayer would like to relocate his business to his own property at 8442 Bushman. Mr. Thayer is proposing to construct an additional accessory structure to house his medical manufacturing process. Home occupations are permitted as an interim use in estate lots. Section 153 of the .093 of the amended zoning ordinance regulate home occupation is enclosed. This is something that the Planning Commission worked on for quite a while. It went to the City Council, came back to the Planning Commission, and then finally was adopted by the City Council. The verbiage that was adopted by the City Council is also included in your packet. Interim use is the same as a conditional use with a stipulated time limit. It should be noted that accessory structures, the cumulative total that's allowable is up to 5,000 square feet as permitted, just a straight permit in the estate lot zone. Mr. Thayer is, if he gets approval for the home occupation, he will also be making an application for some excess over 5,000 square feet, cumulative total, which is allowed under conditional use in the property because it's over 5 acres. This is a 20-acre parcel. So that isn't part of this application. The building is not part of the application. This application is for the use only. The board should review the following findings and determine whether the applicant is consistent with the findings. The intended use meets the definition of home occupation. Home occupation is permitted interim use in the estate lot zone. The use with conditions conforms to the comprehensive plan. The use is compatible with the existing neighborhood. The use should not be injurious to public health, safety, welfare, decency, order, comfort, convenience, appearance, or prosperity. The use is consistent with 153.124 interim use and 153.119 conditional use and 153.093 home occupation. Published and mailed notice was given of the public hearing. Hearing was held December 13th, 2002. Options for the Board of Adjustments to consider. Determine that the proposed application is not an appropriate home occupation and deny the application. Determine that the proposed application is an appropriate home occupation and approve the interim use permit with conditions and/or performance standards. I've listed a number of potential conditions for performance standards that could be considered. All activities shall be within the dwelling and accessory buildings or on surrounding grounds. Interim use permit limit to manufacturing of medical equipment. Interim use permit to expire 12/31 of 2028. That's basically a 5-year time limit, which is pretty common for interim uses. Hours of operation 7 to 5 p.m. I didn't know exactly what those hours of operations are, and I think you can stipulate that if you want. Sign for the facility shall not exceed 6 square feet and shall not be internally lit. Employees shall be limited to family members and 2 employees who are not family. No outside storage. Business-related vehicle trips shall not exceed 10 round trips per day. And cumulative story of the accessory building shall be limited to 5,000 square feet. We may not need that last number 9. Probably should be stricken at this point because and at that time we didn't, when I made this report, I hadn't done quite the figures yet. So with that, I'll answer any questions that you might have.
Jerry, in the past, I thought we have approved like 3-year.
Some were 3, some were 5, some were, typically it's 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, okay. A lot of stuff can happen in 5 years.
And I think the applicant's well aware that a lot of stuff can happen in 5 years and that they're not going to, once it gets too big, it's going to have to leave. And quite frankly, the ending date, that's totally up to the board. That was a suggestion. Now, I do know in some of the conversations I've had with other applicants, if the time period is too short, they tend to have some issues with the lending institutions as far as getting financing to do some of the things that they need to do.
Now, he's only asking for 5 trips a day, and we have it's 10.
This was taken directly out of the ordinance.
Right.
It's following what was approved by the council. Again, that's something that you, as a board, can restrict the trips if you want.
The good thing, it comes out on Bushman.
It does. It comes directly out on Bushman. I think in 3 or 4 years, when you say a lot of things can happen, I think Bushman probably is one of those things that may happen. And improved for safety and travel. And quite frankly, Bushman is one of those roads that we want to see used as a collector rather than a city or a residential street.
the only questions I have.
Guess I don't have anything.
Maybe just a quick question, Madam Chair, Jerry. We've talked in the past about home occupation essentially being a concept of a starter opportunity and moving to a commercial area as the business grows. How do we determine if that business has grown to the point where it needs to move to a commercial facility?
Well, I can think of a couple instances that would trigger that. Let's assume that Mr. Thayer came in and said, I'd like to have 3 employees rather than 2. I think that would prompt a discussion. I think if there were more business trips, you notice a lot more business trips, or the neighbors notice a lot more business trips, I think that would trip the discussion. Let's assume that he's really successful and wants to extend his hours further from the hours that are stipulated as part of or hours of operation in the permit. I think that would trigger the discussion. I think there's a number of things that could trigger that. Are we going to go in there and say, you're too big now, you got to leave? No, we're not going to do that unless he were to not conform with the conditions that were approved. And again, quite frankly, in this whole scheme of talking about economic development and those type of things, you would hope like heck that he gets bigger and expands and can move into something that's in a different area. Quite frankly, there's a lot of folks that have started their business in a garage someplace and have grown into something that's pretty prosperous and something that's very beneficial to the community.
So we see a home occupation more as an incubator concept for a small business.
I think it's a starter, yes. I think incubator is an appropriate word. In this case, it's an existing business that is relocating, but we would hope that business grows, and I think Mr. Thayer probably hopes that it grows too. But he's going into it eyes wide open, understanding that once he gets to that size, he probably has to find a different place.
My only concern would be he's making a significant investment in a facility.
Well, and I think that's the risk that he runs. He's choosing to make this application. He's choosing to take that risk.
Right.
Now, there's a certain amount of, there's a building there, of course. Probably isn't going to move the building to a new facility, but he's probably going to take the machinery and the equipment with him.
Right.
But I don't think that's something that we have to worry about. Now, if he were to come to the planning commission 2 years from now and say, well, I just made this huge investment and I want to expand and have 2 shifts and 3 employees, I think the planning commission would have to say, we talked about this and that's really not part of, it doesn't qualify as a home occupation. It's now a full-fledged commercial facility.
That's why I brought up the issue. I think it is important that you go into this with eyes wide open.
Right. Did that answer your question? Okay.
Yep.
It might be beneficial, Brad, if you were to take that product that you have and just pass it around so that they understand what it is you do make.
Where is
You
this
might
letter? These
just inform him what it's used for.
letter that he understands.
I have a question for you, Jerry. Home occupation is permitted in the EL.
Yes,
It is.
Yes.
That's fact. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
if it weren't, we wouldn't be here.
Right.
My human hair isn't quite that thick, but,
It's permitted as an interim use.
Right.
okay. Okay. And how is it used in the medical industry?
It's in the cardiovascular.
Oh, I figured. Okay. Okay, and that's the device.
Inside the body, so once they use it, they have to throw.
Yeah,
Very cool.
That's the biggest part. That'd be the thinnest, you could tell. It's thicker than all these parts. And that would be the thickest part.
Well,
It's not very big, but it's still manufacturing.
Right.
and that's stainless, is that what it
It's
is?
stainless steel. Yep, all
Okay.
stainless steel. The largest and the thinnest. There's probably over 40 different sizes, but it just matters in lengths, and then some have a radius on it, and some have a flat, for whatever reason.
so that device is going up someone's artery.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's a long wire attached to it, and then another piece that I just send them these parts, and they make an assembly.
okay.
What else want to see? These are the largest one I make.
Does anyone else have questions for Jerry?
I asked Jerry if it, EL zone, was a permitted home occupation zone, and it is. I just wanted to make sure that if we do go ahead and approve it, we're approving it and it's not completely out of line.
Yeah, they'll have, say for example, on this one here, they'll have a piece welded on the end there.
Any other questions for Jerry before we move on to the public input?
5 feet long, and then this here is stainless
Alright.
steel, and then they have a controller in the back.
Public comment? Is there any public comment?
That's a, moving on to.
Okay.
So next item on the agenda is opening this to public input, and I just want to call attention to the fact that we do have in our packet information that somebody had submitted, and that it indicates there's some traffic concerns and road concerns. So if you haven't read through that, please do at this time. We'll just put that on the record. All right, is there anyone in the audience here who would like to make comments? If so, please approach the podium and identify yourself and your address.
My name is Dallas Colvin. I live at 32129 Northwoods Lane. My property and neighbors right there, we all butt up to, well, we don't actually butt up to his property. There's a road that goes down to somebody that lives at the far end. It's not a city street. I think the very first part of that road is, so it's, I think it's called Donner or something like that.
Danner.
Denner, okay, thank you. That has been there for quite a while. But if you go beyond that, then it's all a private property, I guess. The previous owner allowed the person to build at the end and use that road. And there's a term, I can't think of what it is, that allows him to use that road for a length of time or however long. And I guess one of the concerns I have is that size of building. I don't really understand why, for that manufacturing, he needs that large building. And if it's a home occupation type thing, he should exit through his property, not come back out onto this other road that isn't a city property, or it's guy at the end has that, I don't recall that term, but, so I guess I'm not against is manufacturing that equipment. But I guess I am concerned about the size of that building for what his purpose is. If he makes all his own tooling, that takes some decent sized equipment, even if it's small tooling. I've been in that type of business for many years. And so it's more than just assembling, it's actually manufacturing. And I don't know what 2 outside employees are, what that means. If he has, besides himself, 2 employees, and they come and go, and he has deliveries come and go, if he exits onto that road that butts up to our property, I have a concern with that amount of traffic, even on a road that's not city property. Why can't he exit, excuse me, on through his own existing property?
Jerry, do you have a comment on that?
Actually, if you look on the screen, there's a proposed survey with the proposed building on it. That survey indicates that the entrance is off the driveway, not off of Darner Lane. And
Off what driveway?
it's utilizing the existing driveway to the house.
Yeah?
That should continue.
So if he builds this building, he will come back through his own property on his own drive?
Yes, he actually said that in his presentation also. And if that's something that the board wants to stipulate as part of a condition, they certainly can. I could say that ingress and egress is off the driveway on to Bushman. Or they could stipulate that Darner Lane not be used for business travel. That's something that could be stipulated very easily. But the intent is to come straight off of Bushman utilizing the existing driveway.
Okay. Because the house that's, this Donner, is that what you said it was, Donner Road?
Pardon?
That road, what's the name of it, Donner, is that what you said?
Danner Lane
Yeah.
is there.
Yeah.
And it goes for about 100 feet, and then it turns into a private easement.
Easement, that's the word, yeah, thank you.
And that's been recorded
House-
against the property.
That house that this goes down to, it's on the east side there, I know they have small children too, so was a concern if they came out on that road.
So I have a question for you. You had stated, so we've kind of moved, I think we've solved the concern about the driveway, but you said that you have a concern about the size of the building. Assuming if it was 5,000 square feet, which is allowable, what would be the concern of the building of that size? How would that impact you? What would your concerns be?
Well, I guess a building that size doesn't take up 20 acres. So I didn't need that much land for that building.
Would that be a
Well,
I'm kind
I
of
don't
trying
know.
to find what's
And if
the
you-
detriment
And I
to
guess I have a
the,
concern if it's an interim thing that's only for 5 years. Why a person would, like, I think you're referring to, invest that amount of money and in 5 years, what does he do? If you don't want him there any longer, he has to just move out of there?
Can I answer that concern? Typically, there's an interim use comes with a beginning and ending date,
Yeah?
and it comes with conditions. If it's 5 years or 3 years or 10 years, whatever it is, if they adhere to the conditions, once that term is up, they can reapply for for an extension. But it's another way to check on the progress of the interim use, so that you can evaluate whether he's adhering to the original terms of the interim use.
And whether or not the business is growing
Right.
beyond
Right.
And what is
Home
the
occupation.
definition of home occupation?
Pardon?
What's the definition of home occupation?
Home occupation is the use of a commercial nature conducted by an occupant of a dwelling entirely within the dwelling or accessory buildings, which is clearly incidental and secondary to the use of the dwelling for residential purposes.
So this would not be used from his home.
Or it can be part of the accessory building also.
An accessory building has no limit to it?
The accessory building would be the building that he's proposing to build.
But accessory building has no limit as far as size?
On,
I mean, he's got a lot of land there, 20 acres for 5,000 square feet of a
Okay.
building.
right now, he can build a cumulative total with a straight across-the-board permit, 5,000 square feet. He already has 1,800 square feet in accessory buildings. So the difference in what he's asking for is more than 5,000 square feet. In order to get more than 5,000 square feet, he has to go through another process, which is a conditional use process. But there's no sense in going through the conditional use process if he can't get approval for the use. So there's another hearing, if in fact the use is approved this evening, there would be another hearing down the line as far as his building is concerned, being of XYZ size. And I think the proposal that's in that survey is, I believe, 40 by 92, if I'm not mistaken.
But I guess I still can't visual 20 acres for, and it's going to be less than 5,000 square feet his building is putting up.
He
right?
doesn't need the 20 acres, but he has a 20-acre parcel that he's going to use. Now, if he was going to split off that parcel, then we'd be talking about a subdivision and dividing it, but that's not what he's asking for. He is asking for a use on the piece of property that's 20 acres in size.
And I guess I'm thinking there's another down the road. He's already got his 20 acres incorporated in all this, and he wants to, yeah, I know he has to come back and you have to go through this process again. But that just puts off the inevitable. After every time you want to do something, you got to come back, get it approved, come back, get it approved, come back, get it approved.
I believe Mr. Ayers broached that subject a little earlier when he said, how do we determine whether this use no longer is a home occupation, but it's graduated to a commercial use? Once he gets past that certain size and he has more employees or wants to have more employees, that doesn't fit the definition of a home occupation or the portion of the ordinance that it deals with home occupations. The home occupation ordinance limits them to family members and up to 2 non-family members' employees. I can't get any bigger than that. They would have to redo the ordinance in order to do that. This ordinance was vetted in the Planning Commission 2 or 3 times, and it went to the City Council twice, and this is how the City Council chose to guide the ordinance. So it's the terms of the approval and/or number of employees.
Well, like I said when I came up here, I'm not against
No, I understand.
what he's wanting to do for his income, for his livelihood, but I have the concerns with why we're having to include this 20 acres into this small of a building. And I know the equipment he's asking for isn't just all assembly equipment. If he's making his own tooling stuff, that's a number of pieces of different equipment. Noise-wise, it keeps the windows all shut in the summertime maybe. you won't hear anything. Otherwise, those type of equipment, some of that makes some pretty good noise. But I guess I'm asking the council here to consider, and also the excess that goes out to this existing property, not onto the,
Garner Lane.
thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public input? All right, and then we will go ahead and close the public hearing, and we're going to move on to the official action for the interim use application of I-22002. All right, so going through the findings that we need to review, I think we'll just kind of brush through those and make sure that we are all on track, or at least on the same page on that. So the board should review the following findings and determine whether the application is consistent with the findings. So yes or no. Number one, the intended use meets the definition of home occupation. We did review that and we said yes, that it does. Number two, home occupation is permitted as an interim use in EL zone, which Teddy, you did ask that and confirm that was a yes. Number three, the use and conditions conform to the comprehensive plan. When we look at the plan, we do have in there that we are looking at expanding small businesses, home occupation, so that is consistent. And number four, the use is compatible with the existing neighborhood. So that one is a little bit, I guess, questionable to see if we all agree if that is consistent with the use in the neighborhood.
What's a neighborhood? That would be my question.
What's that?
What is a neighborhood,
Oh, right.
Right. Well, and I look at it,
especially on 20 acres? You are the neighborhood.
and we do allow home occupation, so is there anything about this neighborhood that it would not be consistent to have a home occupation? Is there anything that would be detrimental to the area or the neighborhood for having a home occupation there?
Not that I saw, but
Okay. So I would say that yes, we think it's compatible based on everyone's input. Number five, the use would not be injurious to public health, safety, welfare, decency, order, comfort, convenience, appearance, or prosperity. Based on everything that was given, I don't see that there's any public health concerns with the recycling that is going on. You asked some questions about the water and how that is handled. So I would say, does everyone agree that yes, that would be consistent? All right. Number six, the use is consistent with 153.124 and 153.119 and 153.093, which we did review during the findings and said yes. And then number seven, we did see that it was published and a mailing notice was given for the public hearing. So based on this, the findings all are consistent with yes. So we can move on to whether we want to either determine that the proposed application is not appropriate and deny application, or determine that it is appropriate. And based on those findings, I'd say we all agree that it is appropriate. So then the next potential here would be to see if anyone would like to make a motion and potential conditions or performance standards for approving.
Before we make a motion, Madam Chair, could we add that condition of traffic staying on the driveway, whatever the appropriate words would be?
Ingress or egress?
We could make that number 9, since we're striking number 9. We could say number 9 is ingress and egress off the driveway to the,
Okay.
I would strike number 5 also for the sign. 'Cause if he doesn't want a sign, why would we want to allow it?
It's actually taken straight out of the sign ordinance is where it came from.
Right.
and I would say too, for hours of operation, just because he had said that it could go to 5:30, I would say maybe change that from 7 to 5:30 or 7 to 6, just to allow for a little leeway so there isn't somebody caught, working an extra 15 minutes and having that be an issue.
I agree.
Is there any way to put something in there for the sound? I'm just amazed that those machines don't make a lot of noise. Or a decibel or something, you know?
Jerry, the city's noise ordinance or some, oh, that's what you're, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Would we just refer to say something specific as keeping the noise ordinance in check? I mean, if we already have it, I don't know if we need to.
We have a noise ordinance that has specific time.
And
I would advise against going to a DD because it's very subjective. It's hard to
decibels are, Tom, are you saying? Oh,
avoid putting that into an interuse permit because it is something that's very subjective. And during the day, a lawnmower would probably be way louder than what you would get at the property.
but doesn't our,
Our noise ordinance talks about, objectionable noise.
Right.
Property, boundary.
right,
And if he's in the middle of a 20-acre parcel,
not gonna be an
lawnmower
issue.
or leaf blower would be way, way louder than anything you're gonna hear from his building. So, I mean, you could put it in there, but it would be totally absurd.
And since we already have an ordinance addressing it, why
Right.
add confusion?
Right.
I mean, that's already an ordinance is on the books. Irrespective of whether it's a property or not, a commercial property, interuse permit.
The nuisance section of the ordinance actually addresses noise, and it addresses the allowable decibels at the property line. So there is enforcement already. If it becomes an issue, we would, get ourselves a decibel meter and go out and try to monitor it to see what the decibels are at the property line. I think one of the advantages here is that because of the type of facility because of the clean nature of the product, I think is probably going to be totally indoors all the time.
I have to keep the window shut. Dust would interfere with
So I think that there's a concern for the noise. The noise is already addressed in the ordinance by specific decibels. If in fact it becomes an annoyance, we certainly can look at the situation and enforce the ordinance.
Who enforces it?
Pardon?
Who's we? Jerry does? You go out with a,
Actually, I think that was one of the things that Daniel was hired to take on, is some of the enforcement of some of those code issues. He's still getting his feet wet, but eventually I think it's going to be his specialty, per se, or one of his specialties.
that's good.
Should we go through each of these and just kind of make sure we're on the same page? So
So can we clarify what we're doing?
So potential conditions or performance standards. Number one, all activities shall be within the dwelling and accessory buildings or on surrounding grounds. Number two, the interim use permit is limited to the manufacture of this medical equipment. Number three, interim use permit expires in 5 years on 12/31/2028. Hours of operation, we would change to 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Is that? Strike number 5, change number 6 to number 5, and employees shall be limited to family members and to employees who are not family. Number 7 becomes number 6, no outside storage. Number 8 becomes number 7, business-related vehicle trips shall not exceed 10 round trips per day. That would give them some leeway if they do end up on certain days to go out to lunch, for instance, and not have it be a stickler on detail. And then strike the current number 9 and add a new number 9 that says the ingress and egress is off of the driveway. Is there anything else anyone would like to?
Is there, on to Bushman, Do you add that on there? Because I
Clarified
think there
on
may
to
be
Bushman.
another driveway going out to,
Ingress and egress onto Bushman directly.
yeah.
To Bushman Road. So we'll just add that specifically to say Bushman Road. Anything else we want to add?
Quick question, Madam Chair. Do I recall that your current employee is a family member? Yes. Okay, yes.
All right.
So, is that?
But I would consider him an outside employee,
Oh,
because he doesn't live on the premise.
Okay,
He lives in Freezing Point. He's on Ranchette, and I'm on Bushman.
okay.
Do we have any other clarifications or possibly a motion?
I would move the approval of this application.
All right, so we have a motion to approve the application, the current 1 through, let's see, it would actually be 1 through 8,
With conditions.
with the conditions listed here. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
All right, we have a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion has passed. All right, moving on to G, other. Is there anything else that anyone has for discussion? I do have a question, Jerry. We had talked about maybe doing a training session. Is
We
that
are.
something that's still?
I'm talking to an individual who has done one for the city of Cross Lake.
Okay.
We're trying to figure out a date. It's probably going to be after the first of the year. But yeah, it's still on the agenda to do.
Anything else anyone has?
No.
All right, then we will adjourn the meeting. Thanks, everyone.